Welcome back to Selling on Giants, the podcast where we dive into actionable strategies for e-commerce brands to scale smarter and dominate the digital shelf. Today, we're talking about a topic that often flies under the radar but can make or break your online presence: PIM systems. If you've ever struggled with scattered product data, managing SKUs across multiple channels, or keeping your digital shelf organized and optimized, this episode is for you. I'm joined by John Kuefler, Senior Director of Digital Experiences at Limelight Marketing and a true expert in streamlining product management. John's going to walk us through how PIM systems centralize your product data, ensure consistency across platforms, and help you scale efficiently. Whether you're selling on Shopify, Amazon, Walmart, or beyond, this episode will help you identify when you need a PIM, how to choose the right one, and best practices for implementation. Stick around for actionable takeaways and insights into tools like Salsify, which is helping brands level up their product management game. Let's get into it. In this episode of Selling on Giants, John Kuefler, Senior Director of Digital Experience at Limelight, breaks down how brands can streamline their product management and optimize their digital shelf life with PIM, Product Information Management Systems. So, what is a PIM system? A PIM system centralizes product data to ensure consistency and accuracy across multiple platforms. Brands with high SKU volumes or those selling on multiple digital platforms can benefit the most by eliminating scattered data across spreadsheets, ERPs, and drives. So, when should you adopt a PIM? If you're expanding to multiple sales channels, think Amazon, Walmart, Shopify, etc. Once you're managing hundreds to thousands of SKUs, the earlier you stay organized, the smoother your transition will be. Some of the key benefits of a PIM system: centralized control. Update products, details, imagery, videos in one place and push changes to all the platforms. Consistency. Maintain a unified brand experience across every digital shelf. And improved efficiency. Faster product launches and reduced time to market. What to look for in a PIM system? Support for specific platforms like your Amazon, Walmart, Target, Wayfair, and your website. Flexibility for complex data, packaging details, imagery, 360 visuals, and robust enhanced content capabilities. Think A+ content, videos, and rich product descriptions. AI's role in PIM systems: AI is driving smarter workflows and hyper-personalization in content delivery. However, caution against over-reliance on AI-generated content, which can lack quality and consistency. Do you want to understand how a PIM system could revolutionize your product management and digital shelf presence? Tune into the full Selling on Giants episode with John Kuefler to learn actionable insights on staying organized, reducing inefficiencies, and scaling smarter. Let's dive in. Hey, John, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on to talk about optimizing your digital shelf life with PIM systems, which is an intense topic, and you're just the guy to kind of walk us through this. Before we get into it, I'd love to introduce you to our audience and talk a little bit about what makes you great. So that being said, John, you've spent over 14 years in e-commerce and digital strategy. Could you share a bit about how you got started in this field and what drew you to digital experiences and optimization?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Will. And yeah, I've been working on the web in general for a long time, but in e-commerce in particular, I really like the challenges that we have to solve. There's a lot of different marketplaces to sell on. There's a lot of different tactics that can be effective depending on the product that you're selling, and it just goes on and on from there. And there's a lot of technical challenges to solve too. And I have a technical background as well, so that all feeds nicely into it. But I would say, I started out designing just websites, brochure websites, really back before e-commerce was the way that it is today. But with the advent of, Amazon and then later on Shopify and BigCommerce and WooCommerce and all these platforms that democratize e-commerce for the smaller businesses and stuff, that really got me interested. How can we sell product online? How can we make that experience really interesting and meaningful to people, something that they'll remember and more than just a transaction. So all those different layers really excite me with e-commerce. And there's a new challenge every day. There's a new trend every day. We're dealing with AI and other things right now. So it just is really dynamic and exciting.
That's awesome. And it sounds like a true marketer. I like to tell people I have ADD, so the fact that things change all the time, it keeps my job interesting and helps me focus. So that is pretty cool. And how about your role with Limelight? So you've evolved, you've done your own business, you've done your websites and you kind of built up. What's your role with Limelight and kind of how have you evolved into that role to help e-commerce brands?
Yeah, so I'm the senior director of digital experience and a partner at Limelight. So I actually owned a software development company prior to coming on to Limelight, and they acquired us. So we merged together and brought a lot of technical capabilities in alongside the marketing. And then that's really where we thought, okay, e-commerce is the best place to apply this. So I started out, just leading our technical teams, but I've evolved into someone that leads really the entire umbrella of digital experience, customer experience across various web touch points. I also have a background in UX, which I like to bring into play as we work through these types of projects and websites. And so these days, I'm typically kind of on the forefront of leading our e-commerce implementations, whether that's a Salsify implementation or just a new e-commerce website build, and making sure that it's going to deliver great results, look and feel awesome, and be hopefully a joy to maintain for the customer long term.
That's pretty awesome. And that's what I love about marketing agencies is we're like a fine cross between like data and development and creativity. And it sounds like your background, you have a little bit of both, which is going to make this topic really exciting. So let's dive into the main topic because I can't wait anymore. I don't know much about PIM systems, so I'm personally very curious about this. So from data to display, optimizing digital shelf life with PIM systems. So to kick things off from a layman's perspective, because not all our listeners are going to understand what is a PIM system and when they'll need a PIM system, could you explain what a product information management PIM system is and why it's a central tool for brands looking to manage their digital shelf life effectively?
Yeah, so a PIM helps you centralize your product data. That's like mission number one. Consistent, high quality product data converts, right? And especially if you're a shop that has a lot of different types of products or a lot of very deep product content, or you're selling that product on a lot of different digital shelves or marketplaces, having a consistent reliable source of truth for that product data is really important. And it sounds really simple. Like it sounds like, well, yeah, of course we need that, right? But I have worked with many organizations who they've got some data in their ERP and they've got some product data in spreadsheets and there's some imagery on their drive, and it's all over the place. And so when it comes time to push to a new e-commerce platform or make updates, it's like a scavenger hunt, and this wastes time, this wastes dollars because you can't make updates or get to market as quickly. So really the name of the game or the core value proposition here is one source of truth.
Wow. I like that makes a lot of sense too. My co-founder used to work for Ethan Allen and they used the PIM system and they had just thousands upon thousands of SKUs across multiple websites and platforms. So I could see how it can get convoluted. But for some of our smaller sellers or somebody kind of new to the e-commerce game, like at what point do you recommend needing a PIM system? And is there anything you should keep in mind as you're growing your brand? Whether it's, do you just keep everything on and have a master sheet? And when you start getting into different verticals, that's when you would consider this? Is there a specific like sales volume that it makes a lot of sense that you would need a PIM system, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know if there's a super clear answer to it. It depends a little bit on, how many different digital shelves you're selling on, and of course the volume of your products. But I would say once you're starting to sell beyond more than just your own website, or just Amazon, once you're starting to reach across multiple digital shelves, that's one consideration for when it's good to centralize that. And then also product volume. If you're selling two products, you're probably not going to need this type of thing because, it's not going to be an issue to manage that data. But if you're into the hundreds to thousands of products or SKUs, that's when I think this really starts to become valuable. And if you are a e-commerce business that's growing your product set, I think the best thing you can do just to be prepared for the future is stay organized, because the better job you do staying as organized as possible, if and when you are ready for a PIM and the advantages that can bring, you want to be in a spot to where you can effectively get like move from your current state into that. And if you're not organized, it makes it a lot more painful.
That makes sense. And just kind of summarize, because I think you hit it home. So it sounds like it comes down to the volume, the number of products you have, but also your availability in different verticals. So,
Hmm.
website, D2C. Does it also
Yeah.
do brick and mortar? If I'm in physical retail, will the PIM system, have that information for brick and mortar retailers who might need that? Or is it strictly an online system?
It's mostly for online. If you've got your product data in a central spot and you need to do an extract or send a product spreadsheet over to a retailer, brick and mortar, or otherwise for any reason, this gives you like that flexibility, but it's primarily focused on the digital shelf.
Digital shelf. And the benefit, of course, of having a PIM system in place is when I choose to do another vertical, I'm moving into Walmart, let's say, as an example, the data will be organized in there. So, from a brand consistency standpoint, if somebody visits my website, Amazon, Walmart, it's all going to be that same brand experience. Is that correct, John? Am I understanding the benefits of a PIM system?
Yes, that's correct. And, consistency really important. And then it helps you with micro optimizations too. So if we have figured out that, hey, showing this type of image first, it works
Mm.
better than showing that type of image first in our product carousels or things like that. And we want to activate that type of experience consistently. That central source of truth and pushing to those different retailers can help a lot.
Oh, so that's interesting. So not only is it a database, but if I wanted to update my main image across 5 different verticals, I can do it in that centralized system and it'll update on all the different platforms.
Yep, that's correct.
Wow. Oh, that is pretty cool. Awesome. That sounds like a lot of brands need to be using this. So on that note, when a brand is ready to adopt a system like this, what are some of the considerations when vetting out these different systems and deciding what's best for your organization?
Yeah, so there are, a bunch of different PIMs out there at various levels. So there's some that are better for really small businesses and their cost reflects that. There are some that are like highly enterprise grade and it's going to be a more complicated integration. It's like the HubSpot of PIMs versus the Salesforce of
Yeah,
PIMs, right? And
fair enough.
what you need depends on your needs there. But I think the first thing to start with is a really detailed list of your requirements. Every brand is going to have some unique spin or some unique aspects to how they sell, and so that all needs to be understood, documented, so that any of those nuances can come out in a discovery process as you're evaluating PIM vendors. Last thing you want to do is rush through that and sign a big contract and then end up with something where it's like, oh, we actually can't do this really important thing. So having those requirements written out, really, really important. And then working with various PIM vendors to vet, hey, can you do what we need based on this set of requirements?
That's interesting. What are some of the typical requirements? I know you said every brand has, their uniqueness, and of course they all do, but what are some of the themes you see often so some of our listeners can understand some of the basic requirements?
Yeah, so some of it comes down to what retailers you want to sell with, right? So if you need to sell with Target, Walmart, Amazon, Wayfair, et cetera, you need to make sure that the PIM you select supports pushing product data to that digital shelf, to that vendor.
Mm.
Another thing that comes up often is packaging requirements. So
Oh,
when you are sending information about your products to somebody like Walmart, they're going to need to know the specifics of your packaging because that comes into play with how they fulfill and ship the product and things like that. So you want to make sure that if you've got or if you're an organization that has a bunch of multi-box products or things like that, that is scenario is supported and will work correctly because things can get a little bit complicated with that type of thing. Beyond that, if you're very video heavy or you're using a lot of like 360 carousels or 360 imagery and things, you want to make sure that type of thing is supported. And if you are a food brand, if you're selling anything that is consumable, you've got nutrition facts and things like that you need to make sure are supported as well.
that's pretty, and a lot of that makes sense, of course. These PIM systems, do they come with customer support? Typically, do you work with a team with them, or is it a lot of it's self-service and that's why they would seek out an agency or a partner to help guide them through that process?
Good question. Yeah, it really varies by the PIM vendor. So there are some where they'll sell you the license to the product and then they might sell you support alongside that. There are others who have their own implementation teams that they'll have you work with. And then there are yet others where they'll ask you to work with a vetted implementation partner. And so that ends up being us in a lot of cases. We get referred to from those PIM systems when somebody is completing their purchase and kind of onboarded as that partner who's going to carry it over the implementation finish line.
Man, that's pretty cool. So on your end, as somebody who helps implement these and get brands up and going, what are some of the KPIs you look at? So if I'm a brand, like how do I know if I have an effective PIM system and like what do I analyze? Is it just like errors and breakdowns, or is it more complicated than that?
Yeah, there's a couple things that you can look at. So one is just like time to market with product launches. So if that's an area where things are slow or you're struggling to get a new product syndicated and out and available everywhere in a timely fashion, if you can speed that up, that's one thing that we look at. Another thing is accuracy of content and completeness and consistency of content across all these different retailers. Every retailer has a little bit different requirement for how you format content, how many images are allowed, all these various things. So consistency can be a challenge, but if you can get that in a better spot, conversions are typically better. So we'll look at that. And then speaking of conversions, just overall conversion rate, the higher quality our product content is, the more likely somebody's to add it to cart and purchase it. And alongside that, return rate too can be something that we see decrease because accurate product content that reflects exactly what a customer is going to get helps make expectations match better, and then people will be less likely to return a product, hopefully. So there's quite a few different things you can measure and look at. And you had asked earlier about like how do we prepare for something like this? Establishing those KPIs and those goals, the things you want to make better at the beginning, so you can measure them after, is one really important thing to do.
That's interesting. And so what I'm hearing too, so you guys actually get conversion rate. Like, is the data central so I could go in to my PIM system and kind of see like omni-channel data from one source, like conversion rates, maybe traffic or other KPIs like that?
So you can see some traffic from, or some KPIs or analytics and metrics from some of the PIM systems. That just depends on what you're using. But certainly there are things like impressions that you can see with enhanced content and product data. And then sometimes other metrics as well. Usually we'll still look in, Google Analytics or the analytics of whatever platform we're selling on as the main source of truth, just because it's going to be that most direct attribution. But there's also some analytics that the PIM systems will show too.
That's pretty interesting. And why not, right? They're already plugged into the system. So with that being said, so once a PIM system's in place, I'm a brand, we decided to work together. What are some best practices in keeping the product data organized across these different channels? Is there anything, is there another system that needs to be in place? Is it just uh, having clear communications? I guess what are some best practices after the fact to make sure that maintenance is being done and that things are working smoothly and we don't find that we have a problem when we're moving to a new vertical and then may delay
Mhm.
things.
Ownership is the main thing. Somebody has to be that PIM master or the owner of the PIM and the product data health internally. It's a little bit of a data governance role, a little bit of a technical role. But if you don't have ownership once you go live with your PIM, that you're not going to get the outcomes that you want. So throughout that process of implementing and onboarding, an organization should be thinking about who's the person who's going to be the caretaker of this long term, and then that person ends up being kind of the end all be all for making sure that product data is getting updated appropriately, work streams are running smoothly, syndication is working, and so on.
That's pretty interesting. And so on that note too, so is it the larger the organization, you might have different points of contact? Like if it's, let's use a furniture company. Is it unusual for a large brand like that to have somebody who's in charge of like, this specific category and this specific category, and then they're managing the PIM systems there when you're dealing with large quantities of data? Or what's your experience with larger brands and when you're you when they're using large amounts of data? Can one person handle it all, or have you seen it broken up into roles?
I've seen it multiple ways. I think one of the benefits of a PIM is that it allows one person to handle more. You have these natural silos that end up coming up when your data's in a bunch of different places. Like if there's the caretaker of SharePoint and the caretaker of, the drives files and the caretaker of this other spot, right? Those natural silos kind of break down efficiency. So you
Mm,
can end up having one person do a lot more if everything is all in one place. That being said, you do get to some breaking points where you may have to break those roles and responsibilities up a little bit. I
mm,
have seen it by like product category if an organization is big enough. I think you have to be really big a lot of the time for that. I've also seen it more often by like the type of product data we're maintaining. So there might be somebody who's more responsible for like your digital assets and your product imagery, photography, video, and copy and things and keeping that up to date and somebody who's more responsible for like retailer specific details and things like that. And so I've seen it both ways, but it just depends on, the amount of data, the type of organization, things like that.
very cool. So it sounds like that's an enterprise level problem, but probably for most of our listeners, your small and mid-sized businesses, they're going to have a PIM guy or a data guy, and they're going to manage the PIM system and the relationship with any vendors that might be helping maintain. Is that a correct statement?
I would say so. Yeah.
Beautiful. So now that we went through the PIM system process, am I ready for it? What it looks like to get onboarded, what are the different features and facets? In your experience, and somebody I'm sure is called in to consult and help e-commerce brands with this process, what are some common pitfalls or challenges you find that brands have that you're able to address and that maybe our listeners can look out for as they're either considering it or they're working in a PIM system, they just don't know they have this problem yet?
Yeah, so the number one issue that we see at the beginning of this type of process is that people's data is all over the place and that there's just data cleanliness issues. So inconsistencies of formatting or just missing data or incorrect data, things like that. And that's a factor of, over the years, typically just a lot of people, a lot of processes, and just, things getting mixed up. So we see that a lot of the time, and we have to jump in and help to work to triage and correct that. The other thing goes back to ownership. Somebody, even while there's an onboarding process happening to a PIM, there have to be owners in the organization stepping up and, taking charge of a particular area, learning the platform, things like that. And then alongside that, the other thing is change, right? Change is always difficult. And, if we go from the way we've always done it to some new way, there's always some naysayers. There's always a little bit of pain that comes with that. And so some of this is just building people's confidence and, walking alongside them, being empathetic to that and making sure it's a good experience.
That's pretty cool. And that makes a ton of sense too. It sounds like the biggest thing is organization. And for some of us as humans, like it's really hard to stay organized sometimes, especially if you have large amounts of data, it can be overwhelming. So my last question before we jump into Salsify and kind of your role there and what makes this PIM system unique compared to others. AI is no joke. It's changing the game in a lot of aspects of e-commerce. What are you seeing AI in changing when it comes to some of these PIM systems? Is it making your lives easier? Are these platforms adopting AI? And kind of what have you seen so far with AI and any digital transformations with some of these PIM systems?
Yeah, there's two things that I've observed so far. One, in the vein of AI making things easier, most PIMs have the ability to create workflows for product data management, lifecycle management, and AI can make that really streamlined. You can inject a little bit of quasi-human reasoning into a workflow or a process that makes that workflow that much smarter and that much more effective versus like your typical like static decision trees in workflow builders of the past. So that's been really helpful. On the flip side, I think a trap with AI right now, and I know a lot are aware of it, is you can't just generate your product content with AI. You can't just generate your website content with AI, right? And that's such a temptation to do because it's so easy and it sounds good when you read it, right? But it's more critical than ever to have really, really high quality product content. And so to me, that amplifies the need for a PIM because it's way too easy right now to just get a bunch of AI generated junk and throw that
Mhm.
out onto the interwebs, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword there right now, but those are the things that I've observed.
That's pretty cool. And I mean, no surprise. Same thing on Amazon, which is where we work. It's like you could tell when something was written by AI, and even some of the
Mm.
images. It's funny, six fingers and all that other stuff
Yeah.
that people are catching. So I'm sure it's very tempting, and nothing would be worse to do that and then push it through a PIM system and have it show up all over the place. So I can see
Hmm.
why that's important. So let's jump into Salsify. So I know you guys are a Salsify partner. What what is Sal like what it's a PIM system obviously, but what sets it apart? What would make me as a brand a good fit for Salsify?
Yeah. So yeah, as you mentioned, we're a Salsify partner and there are a lot of PIMs out there. So the reason that we have leaned into Salsify is we feel that it is hits the sweet spot between like robustness but simplicity. A lot of these more enterprise grade PIMs, the user interface is difficult, they're tough to learn, a lot of processes that are clunky or difficult or have been kind of bolted onto year after year after year. And then there are some PIMs that are just they're too simple, they're too basic, they're a glorified spreadsheet, and we need more than that. So I think that Salsify hits the sweet spot between those. The other thing that I can say, having worked with the people there for a long time, is the people there are great. They really care about the success of their customers, and I have great relationships with account managers there and customer support people and things like that because we have to work together on a lot of things. And I think that has been a differentiator there. You're more typical to get on a call with just one person on a Zoom who will work through various things with you versus some of these other platforms I've encountered where you get like 10 people, but everybody is like nobody seems to know what anybody else is supposed to do, and it's kind of an awkward experience and stuff like that. So I think just the sweet spot that it hits between enterprise and like more basic,
Mhm.
and then also the people has been my experience so far.
That a good customer experience, especially in anything service related, is a huge difference. And I think we've all been working with a big company, and it's just like this guy does this guy does that, this guy does that, and nobody talks to each other. So you find yourself just
Hmm.
getting bounced around to these different people, and nothing can be more frustrating. So it sounds like Salesify has a really good customer experience. On that note, I'm a brand. I signed up with Salsify. They introduced me to you and your team at Limelight. What does onboarding look like? What is the first 30 days? Like, what do we do together to start moving through this? And any timelines or anything you could share to help manage some of our listeners' expectations if they're considering using a PIM system or maybe moving over from one to another?
Yeah, so the first thing we do, we get to know you, get on a discovery call, get to know your brand, what pain points you have, things like that. And we also send over some intake forms and things to get a little bit nitty-gritty on your data and things like that. So we always try to ask questions first, gather as much information as possible. We have a strong process in place, but it's not a cookie cutter process. Everybody needs something a little bit unique and a little bit different because everybody's products are different, everybody's needs are a little bit different, and so the danger with these implementations is if you throw a just completely static one size fits all on top of every engagement, that's going to be a bad experience for everybody and the outcomes won't be good. The other thing we like to do is that we really like to go workshop in person if we can, and so we'll fly across the country or we'll go meet with you if you're a company that has a physical location, which most of our clients do. And we'll just spend a couple days going through workshops. We'll do initial trainings and demos of the platform. We'll model product data together. We'll get hands-on. The last thing I want to happen is to go through a process, not have enough visibility into things, and then at the end of it, it's a surprise what came out. So we really like to be collaborative, have that transparency. And then from there, usually after that type of workshop, we'll have what we need to really be building the customer's data model, starting to work on syndication and stuff like that. And the timeline can vary depending on the number of products and the complexity of things, but I've seen it anywhere from 2 months to about 6 months, depending on that complexity.
Okay, that's not crazy either. For some reason, I thought like, is this like a year process? So 2 months,
It
reasonable.
could be if you've got a complex enough data set, but and that's more the average that I see.
Beautiful. And last question, I guess, is there anything I haven't asked or anything our listeners should know about Salsify, Limelight, or anything you guys are working on in terms of the PIM systems and the experience of working together?
One thing that I would encourage people to be thinking about is their A plus and enhanced content. So, this is a great opportunity to, make your products stand out on retailer sites. And this is something that Salsify does really well. They've got a great enhanced content module, and we often will work with clients in that capacity. And one of the things that's kind of neat that we can do is even if a client isn't on Salsify, we're able to leverage our Salsify instance that we have from being a partner with them to help generate enhanced content that can be sent across various platforms or that can be put onto their own website even. And so there's even some opportunities there where we're able to utilize the tool to benefit our clients, even if they're not, going to be Salsify customers. So but think about expanded content, A plus content. I think that organizations that can be really agile with that, especially during the holiday season, can have a advantage over those who aren't. And I think that's one of the things that Salsify offers.
Yeah, that nailed it. That's a really good point too, with the content, especially the holiday season, and depending on the seasonality of your products, being able to get those updates on the fly is definitely going to help with conversion rates. So indirectly, it's going to help you make more money too. That is pretty awesome. Well, John, this was super helpful. We have a tradition here. We like to have you pull out your crystal ball and predict the future of e-commerce and technology and how it impacts what you guys are doing. So my question for you is, as e-commerce platforms evolve and new sales channels emerge, what trends do you see? What trends do you anticipate in the functionality of PIM systems to keep up with some of these changes?
Yeah, I think I'm sure others have said this, but leaning into AI, I think there will be hyper personalization that comes into play. We have personalization now, of course. I get on Amazon and I see, hey, these are things we think you'll like. I think that's going to continue to just get deeper and deeper and deeper. I think it's going to be a situation where Amazon or other, our client sites or others are like, hey, your kid's turning 10 this month. Here's some things we think would be great presents, or something like that. I think it converge on the side of a little creepy, but I think that this is what we want. I think people
Yeah.
really like the convenience that affords, not having to think as much. And
Yeah.
the other thing I'll cheat here and do too, the other thing that I think is going to happen is I think people will have AI agents that are doing their shopping for them. So they'll send those out. And it's not that it'll make the purchase, but it will find me the best deal. It'll curate the best options based on reviews and what it knows about me and my preferences. And it'll save me a step in the shopping process. So as we're producing content for all of these platforms, that's another reason that consistency is really important because it might not even be a human that's
Yeah.
the one going and garnering that information.
I totally believe it. We're seeing something now on the Amazon platform where it generated a personalized holiday guide for me. It knew my kids' ages and knew some of the stuff they like because of our shopping habits. And you're right, it borders on the line of creepy, but I bought some items from there. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, actually, my daughter would like this. Add to cart. So I can see it. And it'll be great when it's in Shopify and it's just
hmm
part of the general experience. So pretty crazy. If it happens, you heard it here first. So thanks, John. And I know, John, thank you for being a guest and sharing your valuable insights with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Before we wrap up, could you let our listeners know where to find you and if you're working on anything exciting you'd like to share with the audience?
yeah, best place to find me. You can find me on LinkedIn, of course, but limelightmarketing.com as well if you'd like to peruse any of our offerings. And, in terms of exciting stuff we're working on, it's really just trying to stay on the cutting edge with the things we just talked about, leveraging AI, making sure content is what it needs to be and giving our customers the best experience with that. So.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, hey, John, thanks for being on the show. And for all our listeners, I'll have links to John's LinkedIn, the website, and anything else that we reference on the show. So be sure to check out the show notes wherever you're listening and tuning in. Till next time, stay classy, people. That wraps another episode of Selling on Giants. A huge thanks to John for joining us and breaking down how brands can optimize their digital shelf with PIM systems. If you're managing hundreds or even thousands of SKUs across multiple platforms, John's advice is clear. centralize your data, stay organized, and adopt a system like Salsify to streamline and scale efficiently. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Selling on Giants wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll catch you next time with more expert insights to help you scale smarter and dominate the digital shelf. Until then, stay classy, people.